Thank you so much for joining us today. For those that don't know me, my name is Chris Lustrino, and I'm the founder and CEO of King's Crowd, the first independent rating and analytics service for the online private markets. I could not be more excited to welcome you today to our Fireside chat with Arlan Hamilton. She's the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital. In March, Arlan and her team, in just a matter of days, became one of the first and most successful companies to ever raise $5 million under the Reg CF rules on Republic. While many of you already know, for those that don't, Arlan Hamilton's Backstage Capital has invested $15 million into 175 startups led by underestimated founders and has been featured in Fast Company, Forbes, Fortune, CNN Money, Inc., Entrepreneur, and Quartz. And in October 2018, Arlan was featured on the cover of Fast Company's magazine, making her the first Black woman who is not an entertainer or athlete to grace the cover. But Arlan has such an awesome background, from being the builder of Your Daily Lesbian Moment, which she grew to a monthly readership of 50,000 fans worldwide, to writing for AOL, Suicide Girls, and Curve magazine, to founding and publishing the internationally distributed indie magazine Interlude. She's also spent time on the road with many recording artists working in the music industry with major names, and recently published her own story, It's About Damn Time, published in May of 2020. And by the way, we do have a book club at King's Crowd that we just started, and this was actually the first book we read as a team. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. And Arlan, I love reading your story, but I'm even more excited to be joined by you today. So with that, Arlan, hello, how's everything going?
Thank you for the intro, and thank you for having me here. I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing really well myself. I'm excited to be having this conversation. So good day by me.
Cool.
So with that, Arlan, I know I already provided a bit of an intro, but I thought it'd be really fun for you to share with our audience what inspired you to want to be a venture capitalist, and for those that don't know the story as well, how you came to found Backstage Capital.
Yeah, it was about 2011. I had gotten myself to a certain point in touring on the road with musicians that had been my lifelong dream. And it was still a lot of hard work, and I was the bottom of the rung most of the time, but it was really exciting. And while I was off the road, because it's not very steady, I started noticing a few people were making investments in a place called Silicon Valley, and Ashton Kutcher would talk about Airbnb, or Ellen DeGeneres would talk about, or not talk about, some private investment she made. And so I was just curious about it, and I'd always felt like an entrepreneur since third grade, starting my first candy business, and just kind of came across it, started doing a lot of research, and really was just enamored by this whole idea and this ecosystem, and wanted to start a tech company. And so very shortly after starting that research that I would need to, like, how do you raise money for it, or how do you generate capital, what's all that's needed, I found a statistic that said that 90% of all venture funding goes to white men in the United States, and white men make up a third of the country. And so I was just like, whoa, I'm not a white guy. I reconfirmed that. Well, that's not cool. It's like, it's disappointing and it's sad and all of those things as a human, but it also is like a really silly missed opportunity for a lot of investors. And so I said, wait a second, like, let's reframe this. And I had no personal capital. I was just getting by. And that got worse and worse over time, because as I started to really dial in on, I want to start a fund that invests in other underrepresented founders, not just as a mission or as some sort of philanthropic, and certainly not as a philanthropic effort, but as a business model. Just like any startup, just had a little bit of that. First few years were tough and lean, and took about 3.5 years for me to get my first real check in 2015. And I haven't looked back since then, but it was the idea of 3.5, 4 years of talking to people where this wasn't top of mind for them, and trying to explain that it was mission driven, but it wasn't just about mission, and that they were missing out. So I think that's why today I'm so in love with the crowd, and that's why we took our fund, the operations, to the crowd recently, is just because the crowd has always gotten us.
Yeah.
Whereas these few people with their feet on the desk who have millions of dollars to deploy, it takes them a while to catch up to the crowd.
Absolutely. So I kind of love that. It's not just about the mission. It's literally a good investment thesis where there's a ton of opportunity people are just missing. So let's talk about some of these stats. 175 companies backed, $15 million invested. Of the first 100 companies you've backed, they've gone on to raise over $250 million and create over 500 jobs. It's an incredible number of companies and success. So tell me, going beyond the mission, what is the investment thesis of this fund?
It goes back to the fundamental idea that I had of, if in my research of talking to so many founders at the time and thinking about myself, if so many of these founders who are underrepresented and underestimated have gotten this far, whatever that was to them, on their own with very little, imagine what they could do with a lot more. And then wouldn't you want to be on the upside of that, on the flip side of that, when that comes to fruition? So it's just as simple and plain as that. And we've proven that out over and over and over again, where, for instance, we might have put $25,000, because you do the math on 175 companies at 15 million, it's not a lot of money that we're deploying, but we're getting there early, and we're having a lot of conviction and a lot of other resources behind that, almost like an accelerator. But the earliest stages, now there's some companies we put $25,000 into 3 years ago who are worth more than $100 million today. And it's just because, and a lot of them didn't have people saying, oh, you're going to make it, or that, oh, this is a great idea. It was more like, we're trying to raise 50,000. Can you give us half of that? So It's just great to see all of that, sort of the glimmer in my eye sort of coming true now. And it's all because of the founders.
So cool. Can you tell us more about, and I think this is something that all VCs and founders like to know a bit more about, but in terms of your sourcing and due diligence process at Backstage, what are the criteria and things that you're looking for before you decide to back an investor or a founder?
Yeah, back investors now too. But to back a founder, well, we have different people at the firm who can write checks, and so everybody has a little bit of a different style, or their own style, and then some things that we hold true fundamentally. I'm always personally looking for someone who just has that X factor, and someone who reminds me of myself. I do my own pattern matching. Meaning they don't have to look like me, but they have that drive and that sort of stability and kind of a mixture, kind of a magic to them. But then we're looking for, like, I've started more and more looking as I get a little bit older. I mean, I'm 40 now, a little bit older. I say, is this something that I could figure out and do on my own within a 10-year frame? And if I can't, which a lot of things they are, like, you just kind of, if I wanted to, I could sort of teach myself to code a little bit, right? And then kind of test these waters. But there are some things that I just know I could never crack this in a million years. And for me, that is like so exciting to back someone that answer is no, I couldn't do it in 10 years. So I get to live longer and with more breath than I would normally because of that. So it's my own way of, like, trying to, just live longer and live through other people.
I like that a lot. I think that's a great way to think about it. If I could do it, maybe anyone could do it, but I can't do that.
And I mean, it's not to say that if the answer is yes, that it's a bad idea. Sure. It's just like, what is that quality of life, and what are the things you want to focus on? You have to have something. I talk to a lot of people who are aspiring investors and people who invest in Reg CF, and it's like, you have to have a thesis, and you have to kind of have a core of what you're saying yes and what you're saying no to, because you're just gonna, if it were left up to like people who want to invest and who are optimistic, we'd invest in everything.
Right.
Because we want everything to work out. But I think having that kind of like dialed in, for me, it's something like, I don't think that it means it's easy to do in 10 years if you can do it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I want to moonshot it. I want to go for and that's where I want to spend my time, energy, and money.
Very, very cool. So going off of that, the thing that excites me so much about being in this space is the founder stories. It's the people who are making these things come true. Would love, if you don't mind, I know you love all of your investments, but if you could talk a little bit about some of the founders and companies you backed and why you really like them and are excited about them.
Well, yeah, we have 175 plus, and we're agnostic, so they're across so many different industries, and we don't have favorites. One that's coming to mind right now, just simply because of the timing, is Curl Mix. And I should say that, you know, there are CPG companies, there are deep tech companies, there are SaaS companies. This is a health and wellness beauty brand that is for people of any background who has, or any profile who has curly hair. And I met them 2017. It's a Black couple from Chicago, co-founders. And I met them when they were doing less than 10,000 a month in revenue, and they were mixing the products out of their kitchen.
Wow.
And there's just something about them. They were just so put together. They knew exactly what their vision was, even though nothing in the ingredients, if you will, were proving that out. You know, it was sort of like you had to have a wild imagination, but I believed in them so much because of what they brought to the table and because what they had been able to accomplish was so little.
Yeah.
And we put the first outside 25,000 in. And they were able to use that to go ahead and hire a couple, you know, a few part-time people to mix things for them. They got a piece of a warehouse that they could rent out. And, you know, they'll tell the story, but today in 2020, they did $6 million in revenue.
Wow.
And right now they're raising the max to 5 million, up to 5 million on the Reg CF right now on WeFunder. And they hit 1 million in 4 hours. So they beat our record.
Wow.
We were the first to do 8 hours in February. And then they beat our record by 2x just this week. So it's just that kind of early conviction, I think, and excitement that can really dial in on that X factor. A flip of the coin is another company that we met in 2017, which is called Akash Systems. They're a telecom satellite company. And they have it's another brilliant Black founder. And they hadn't raised $1 million yet, but they were out trying to in the Valley. We did a few things to be helpful, gave some great feedback. We put 25K in, dropped in the bucket, and made a few connections. And they took it from there and just, I mean, went gangbusters. Today, they're, you know, I can't say what they're worth, but it's a lot more than what we put in. And they are, I believe, just like with Curl Mix, if they want to be, I believe Akash will be a unicorn within the next two or 3 years.
Wow. No, I mean, you know, my feeling is if you can accomplish an incredible amount with very little, who knows what you can do if given the resources you actually need.
That's exactly it.
That's scale and build.
Thesis. That's it.
So one of the other things that I couldn't be happier to see is your diversity numbers. So I wanted to read through a couple of them. In terms of your portfolio, the companies that you backed, 80% of those companies that have been backed are people of color. 68% are women, 52% are women of color, 37% are Black women, 13% are LGBTQ, 8% is Latinx. You know, it feels like constantly in this world that we're hearing from traditional VCs that getting to these numbers is an impossibility. It's pipeline issues and all of these other fallacies. So what can VCs learn from you to improve their diversity numbers and frankly, their returns over the long term by taking a similar approach to you?
They can learn everything from us. And I say that with, you know, I'm not worried about how it sounds. There's so much to learn. We can learn from a lot of people too. And we learn from a lot of our peers. We learn from a lot of people who are here before us, but they can learn that it's possible. I mean, I still hear, which is outrageous. I still hear that there's a pipeline problem. 2021 pipeline problem. What are we talking about? It's comical to hear that, right? And I also hear, well, you know, it's not something that I'm like, I can't just walk into any place and have the same connections that you have as Backstage. Well, I get out of my comfort zone, and I guess, and I actually, it sounds kind of icky to even say it, right? But I do that all the time. Backstage does it all the time because not all of us know all of the groups very well that we're investing in. It's sort of like being willing to be uncomfortable and going out on a limb and saying something that may be wrong and asking questions and putting yourself in a position, because the discomfort you feel for a few minutes or a few days cannot compare to the lifetime of discomfort that the actual founder has gone through in their own skin. So if I, you know, and I look at when you say those numbers and I'm hearing 8% Latinx, I'm like, man, we got to step it up. Even though we are 50 times better than the average, in that we got to step it up, right? It's just a
Yeah.
way of doing it. So there has to be this internal drive and incentive, and you got to figure it out. You know, this is your job. You're an investor. Your job is to invest in the best and the brightest, to bring, especially if you're a fund manager, because you're mostly investing other people's money.
Right.
You're doing a disservice by sitting idly by and using excuses for why you won't check out this person or that person. And the you know, if all else fails, hire better, because they're guaranteed there's some hungry people out there who are brilliant in their own right, who may not have their own resources to build up a big firm, but they can really bring value to your firm. And you pay them well, you give them respect, you give them a piece of the carry, and you ask them, hey, you know, you go to bat for them, just like you would with any great candidate for your company. And then you keep them happy.
Yep.
It's really simple. It's really simple. Give me 30 minutes with any billion-dollar fund, and I'll put them into shape. Like, it's bullet points.
Yeah, I came from the private equity world, and I remember just seeing these terrible deals come across my desk, just a traditional company that were bad, and they were investing in them at these inflated valuations. And I was just like, we have to be able to do better than this. Yeah. And then I started looking at the diversity numbers, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay, you want to throw out the social stuff if that's how you feel, fine. But just know you're missing out on many, many multi-billion-dollar businesses that can serve markets you don't even know exist because you don't think or look like that. Like, that's crazy to me. It just absolutely bad. That's why I got so excited about this new space for public. And I'm like, come on, this is not a pipeline issue. We're just not looking. We gave up.
Yeah, I love this model you have, by the way. It sets itself apart with the data analytics. And I just love the space of helping people hone in on what, helping being a democratic way of investing. Because it's not just because, you came from a certain school and you have a certain group of people around you and you have access to money that makes you a great investor. There are so many great investors out there, and I just love that we can kind of take it back into our own hands now with RegCF. And I think of myself very much so like as a startup founder and as an angel investor in that.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I learned from your book is that you're very much a creative person, and you do and try a lot of different things, which is definitely that entrepreneurial spirit. So I want to talk a little bit about Backstage Crowd and Backstage Accelerator that you've also been building. Can you tell us a little bit more about those entities?
BackstageCrowd.com is what we officially started last June. It was a direct answer to a few things, but mainly our not wanting to sit around and wait for institutionals to get us and to catch up to us, and also a lot of lip service that was being given in the wake of George Floyd's murder of all these big funds and big corporations and universities and all these people saying all this great stuff, hyperbole, but it wasn't really resonating and getting to the founders. And so we said, let's start something where it's like a syndicate. It's like an AngelList or something like that, but it's ours. And Jason Calacanis was very helpful in that early stages of it because he's done so well in that space, and he's a friend. And we just kind of just went for it, and with now we have 3,000 investors that are signed up. About 40% are accredited, 60% unaccredited or not sure. And we help them get sure, whatever the direction is. And we send out a deal, at least on one track, at least every 2 weeks that and on the accredited side, it's one that we're hosting. And so we've done about a dozen deals since then in the last 10 months or so, ranging from 50,000 to 500,000 per deal that gets raised. Wow. About 2 million that's been raised in that time. And it's strictly off of us just kind of going out to our network, people who are interested in what we do. And so it helps us go from the 25K, 50K checks, and even the accelerator checks of 100K to like table stakes of 100K to 250 and above. And it helps us kind of really move at our own pace rather than having to wait on a larger fund, although we do that as well. We do raise that. So the accelerator we started in, we announced it in 2018. We took applications, and it's separate, and it precedes the crowd. And it was an answer to, I had said in 2014, I'm going, when it was by myself, I said, I'm going to invest in 100 companies by 2020, led by underrepresented founders. People laughed at me. People thought it was crazy or not necessary or whatever. Like, you can't, there's no way you're going to find 100 companies, period. So how are you going to invest in 100 good companies? Well, as a team, we reached that in May of 2018. Wow. And so we looked back on it, we reflected and said, what do we do next? And to what end? And it was really important to us that we had a quality that we kept. So we thought, let's start an accelerator, built it out with a great group of people who helped us build it out, who still have equity in the company today, even if they're not with us. They built that project out. We started in 4 cities in 2 countries, 1,900 applications in the first month and a half. Had to close up the applications because we thought we were going to get like maybe if we got 800 applications, that'd be great, because we're going to invest in 24 of the companies.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we thought if we got 1,000, oh my goodness, 1,900. We just couldn't believe it. So 24 companies went through in Los Angeles, Detroit, Philadelphia, and London in 2019. And they became part of our portfolio. We call them headliners if you're in our portfolio. So nice. That, COVID has kind of knocked that to the side a little bit, but stay tuned is all I'll say about that.
Really, really cool. Super fascinating. So, for founders who are considering raising capital online, what would your advice to them be now, having gone through it yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should explain that we raised the Reg CF for our operating costs, because we've never had enough under management to get that management fee that most funds get to kind of keep the lights on and pay the bills. So we got really creative and constructed a way to raise for to raise for operations as a fund. We've already started. I mean, we worked with Curl Mix. We kind of advised them a little bit on what they're doing now. And I mean, it's all them. That crazy raise that they're doing is incredible. But I would say, so I have an academy, online academy, and arlansacademy.com. And one of the courses is by a woman named Hannah in the UK. And she does a great course on, should you crowdfund?
Yeah.
And, I take every course before I put it online. And it's really, it's very true. I agree with it. It's not everybody should crowdfund, and you should have a plan going into it, a really strong plan. But it is absolutely something that, I mean, with this 5 million now, the crowd is competing with venture capitalists. Like before, they were competing with seed investors, angel investors, VCs who have these earlier check sizes, 250K, 100K, 500K. Now they're really able to compete as a group, and those founders benefit from it, where I'm a founder. I get to decide if I'm going to go with this big fund, which could be great, or go with the crowd, or do a combination. And so there's more strategy to it now, and there's more opportunity to it now. So I would say go in with very soberly and understand what your leverage is. And I say that understanding that you don't have leverage is a form of leverage. Like knowing what the game is and really knowing your position is really important. And it may not be today that you can go out there and raise $1 million, but if you figure out a plan going forward, I think this is going to be a long game, and this is going to be beneficial for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And to that point, we've definitely seen there's kind of this breed of companies who are coming back 2-3 times, almost 20 or 30% of companies now will do multiple raises. And what they're saying is that ability to control my raise, how much I raise, the terms I raise on, like, that's something they've never had before. It kind of puts a little bit more of the control back in the hands of the founder. And, capital, wherever you can access it, if you can, and you can do it on terms that make sense, that's great. But know that this is an option. This is an opportunity for you as a founder.
That's right.
So we'd love to take a quick step back before we start to wrap things up here. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the great people that are involved with your organization that are helping to push forward all of these missions and accomplish what you guys are doing?
Well, people on our fund, we have 2 other partners. So Brittany Davis and Christy Pitts, and then we have a principal, Chacha Valadez, and then there's an operating team Megan and Jamie and Claire. And so Christy came from Verizon Ventures. So she spent 13 years at Verizon, starting as someone who worked at one of the retail stores as a teenager or maybe early college years, and started there and got to see a lot of the innovation in telecommunications, kind of front row, and was young enough to be able to be on have her finger on the pulse of that, parlayed that into an executive role, and then eventually went into their venture side of things. So she came into Backstage having found us in some of her own diligence from that purview and said, this is what I've been looking for. And with the blessing of Verizon, actually started working at Backstage, because it was the manifestation of what she had been hoping to find as an investor herself. So that's just a really great perspective to have at the fund. And then Brittany Davis, she comes from a more, I would say she comes from a very highly analytical place and a banking background. She went to Harvard Business School, and she had her own company for a while. So she has a little bit of that analytical banking and also operating experience. The combination, I think, that is really helpful. And she, in fact, helps lead our deal flow team, while Christy is incredibly helpful to all of our headliners. I mean, this is a huge portfolio, so it's just valuable help. And then Chacho, he too worked at a retail store selling phones. And he'll tell you he's been a window washer, and he's worked at country club and this and that. And he's a principal on his way to being a partner one day, and he's just invaluable when it comes to supporting everything that we do. And then also he co-led a couple of deals for the first time in 2020.
Nice. I know you have a hard stop at 10:30, but one last question, if you don't mind me asking, is what does success look like to you in 5 years for Backstage Capital?
It's interesting because we're talking about that right now. And because I think in decades and not quarters, it's an even bigger question, right? It's like, what does it look like? I think we have 3 or 4 ways that Backstage could go, and maybe a combination thereof of any of those. I think it could go to the direction of, we have $500 million under management. We've grown into that. We're now doing these later stage deals, following on to all the seeding that we've done. It could be that our accelerator is known far and wide and has, a portfolio in the hundreds, and just really built to compete and just complement the ecosystem. It could be that we just really dial into crowd and become this mega syndicate and just really hone in on that. But I think no matter what it actually turns out to be, the main thing is it's going to benefit the founder no matter what. That's going to be the North Star. It's going to benefit the founder. It's going to go in the direction of impact, yes, and of catalyzing. Mostly, that's what we want to do, catalyze others. And so, you might even see us become an LP, a main LP and things like that. So I think the sky's the limit for us, and we just have to really dial in on what direction we want to go in, while always remaining true to who we are and what we are as a fund.
Couldn't appreciate that more. Arlan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a wonderful conversation. It's a real privilege to have a chance to chat with you. And good luck with everything that you're doing. And thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, have a wonderful day. Take care, Arlan. Bye.